Some of the most visited places on Earth are now asking you to pay before you even step through the door. Not a museum ticket. Not a tour. Just the act of arriving. Venice, Amsterdam, and Bali have all introduced entry requirements in the past few years, and more destinations appear to be moving in the same direction. This video explains why it is happening now, what it actually changes, and what travelers are quietly doing in response. Let's start with the contradiction that made this story go global. For most of modern history, public space was free. You could walk the canals of Venice, wander the streets of Amsterdam, or hike toward a temple in Bali without paying anyone for the privilege of being there. That assumption is now being challenged in a growing number of places. Venice began piloting a daytripper entry system that requires certain visitors to register and pay a small access fee on peak days. The target is the kind of tourist who arrives in the morning, takes photos, and leaves by evening without spending meaningfully in the local economy. Amsterdam has introduced restrictions on cruise ship arrivals and is actively working to redirect tourist flows away from its most crowded neighborhoods. Bali introduced a tourist levy that applies to international arrivals, framing it as a contribution to cultural and environmental preservation. These are not identical systems. The amounts differ, the enforcement methods differ, and the political debates behind each one differ. But the underlying logic is the same: the cost of mass tourism is no longer being absorbed quietly by the places that receive it. Here is what most coverage misses. This is not primarily about money. The fees being discussed are generally modest. What these systems are actually doing is creating friction. A small payment, a registration step, a booking requirement, these are tools designed to slow the flow, to make impulsive day trips slightly less automatic, and to give local governments data about who is arriving and when. The fee is the mechanism. The real goal is crowd management. And it appears to be working in specific, measurable ways. Travel reports from Venice suggest that the registration requirement alone caused a portion of daytrippers to reconsider or reschedule. Not because the fee was prohibitive, but because the extra step made the trip feel like a decision rather than an impulse. This matters because the economics of overtourism are genuinely damaging. When a destination receives more visitors than its infrastructure can support, the costs fall on residents. Housing prices rise as short-term rentals displace long-term tenants. Narrow streets become impassable. Local services strain under demand that spikes seasonally and then disappears. The people who live in these places year-round are effectively subsidizing an experience for people who leave. The entry fee model is an attempt to internalize that cost. Whether it succeeds depends heavily on how the revenue is used. In places where the funds are directed toward infrastructure maintenance, resident support, or environmental restoration, the logic holds. Where the money disappears into general government budgets without accountability, residents remain skeptical. Now, what are travelers actually doing in response? 3 clear behavior shifts are appearing. First, some travelers are planning further ahead. The registration and booking requirements that come with these systems reward people who plan trips weeks in advance rather than deciding the night before. This is already reshaping how certain destinations market themselves. Second, a segment of travelers is actively seeking alternatives. When a famous destination adds friction, nearby places that do not yet have entry requirements start to look more attractive. This is creating a secondary wave of attention for lesser-known towns and regions that sit within easy reach of the famous ones. Third, and perhaps most interestingly, some travelers are leaning into the fee as a signal of quality. If a destination is managing its crowds, the experience of being there may actually improve. Travel communities are beginning to discuss entry fee destinations as places that have taken the problem seriously, which functions almost as a positive marker. The deeper question is whether this model will spread. Barcelona, Kyoto, and Dubrovnik have all faced severe overtourism pressure and have explored or implemented various restriction measures. As climate pressures on coastal and heritage sites increase, and as more residents in tourism-heavy cities push back politically, the incentive for local governments to introduce some form of managed access is growing. The unresolved tension is this: public space has historically been a commons. The shift toward paying to enter a city, even a small symbolic amount, represents a quiet but significant change in how we define access to the world's shared places. Whether the change is a reasonable response to a real problem, or the beginning of a tiered system where the best destinations become accessible only to those who plan and pay, is a question that does not yet have a clear answer. Which destination do you think will introduce entry requirements next? Leave your answer below. And if you want to understand another quiet shift in how people are moving through the world, the story of what is replacing traditional hotel rooms in airports is worth your time.